Have you ever wondered what would happen if you increased the daily budget of your Performance Max campaign from $500 to $5,000? Well, we did exactly that for one of our clients, and I'm going to show you what we learned. Hey, this is John from Stub Group. We are a top premier Google partner digital advertising agency, and we help businesses dominate Google Ads and make money online. So we had a client that we're working with, and they wanted to scale very, very quickly during Q4, particularly during November, December of 2023. So they were selling a product that was very holiday oriented. They were focused on target cost per acquisition. They were an e-commerce company, but because of lifetime value and things, they were mostly focused on CAC, cost per client acquisition. And so their marching orders to us as our agency was, let us grow as fast as possible, scale as fast as possible. We had a CPA target that we were trying to achieve, and they wanted to sell as many orders as possible at that level. And so we started out with several different campaign types, and we were seeing some good success initially, getting orders roughly within the target cost per acquisition they wanted to see, some even lower for some campaigns. And we were driving a decent amount of volume through a Performance Max campaign. And so they came to us and said, hey, we need to scale aggressively. This was early November. So the date range I'm going to show you here was November 9th through 13th was when we did this test. And they said, hey, we want to scale really, really aggressively. What if we, massively increase the daily budget? And so we said, hey, that's an option. We can increase the daily budget. The reality is that if we massively increase the daily budget, Google's algorithms are probably going to go a little haywire and take a while to figure things out. We're probably not going to see efficient ad spend, but we can see how much traffic is available and kind of what the scaling potential is. So to be honest, we kind of discouraged and said, hey, let's start gradually increasing. But the client said, nope, we need to scale very, very quickly, which I understood. That was their goal, to scale as quickly as possible. And they said, let's take the risk and see what happens if we throw a bunch of money at Google. What will that translate to in terms of orders and volume? And so that's what we did. I'm going to show you in the account exactly what happened. So this is a Performance Max campaign that we were running. On November 9th, we spent about $464.10, and we drove 30 conversions. 30.02 if you want to be really, really specific. And the next day, that Friday, November 10th, is when we increased the budget. And you see that we spent almost $500. We spent $4,619.22. And we saw the number of conversions significantly increased, went from 30 up to 89. But if we look at cost per conversion, we'll also see it started going up. It went from 1546 to 5166, so a significant percentage increase. And then the day after that, Google spent $8,226.09. And this is an area where we could have done a better job of proactively communicating to the client about the reality of how Google's daily budget works. Because as you may know, if you've had to deal with this in the past, Google reserves the flexibility on any given day to spend up to 200% of that daily budget. So the daily budget was $5,000, but Google reserved the ability to spend up to $10,000. In this case, they spent just over $8,000 in that single day. The way they approach it is over the course of the month, they're going to try and make sure you don't spend over what your daily budget times 30.4 would be for the entire month. But in that particular day, they spent a lot more than $5,000. And this is always one of the tricky things whenever you're trying to do a short-term test like this, because if we wanted to make sure we capped our spend at $5,000 and try and spend it evenly throughout the day, then ultimately we would have had to set our daily budget at $2,500 because Google could have spent up to $5,000. But then if Google only ended up spending $2,500, we wouldn't know really, especially with PMax, if that was because there wasn't enough traffic available or because Google was trying to average things out over time. So long story short, we had the daily budget set to $5,000, spent $8,226 on that Saturday. Next day, that Sunday, spent $6,265.06. We would have spent more that day probably, but we went ahead and called the test before the end of the day because of the cost per conversion. Went from 1546 on Thursday to 5166 on Friday to 119.17 on Saturday. Back down a little bit to 80.29 on Sunday, but still way higher than we needed. And so the next day, we spent way less, came back down, still spent more than we'd been spending prior to the test, but brought the budget down to, I want to say $1,000 in that range. We spent just under $1,000, and you can see the cost per conversion came right back down to $26.66. So this is what happened. We massively scaled budget, and Google went crazy, spent the money. They did get more conversions. The number of conversions definitely did increase, went from 30 to 89 to 69 to 78 then back down to 37 on that last day after the test. But the cost per conversion also massively increased. And we did experiment some more with scaling the PMax campaigns. We did get a little bit more aggressive in the daily budget after the 13th, but definitely never got back anywhere close to the levels of what we spent for those couple of days because the efficiency just wasn't there. So if you were curious what happens when you significantly scale budgets from a day-to-day basis, here's what happens. Again, this is why generally you want to be more conservative and gradual in increasing, because otherwise you may well see results like this, which ultimately were not what we wanted to see, and that's why we ended the test. Thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful. If you want more content like this, tap that subscribe button, and you'll see more of our content in your feed. Until next time, signing off.